Welcome. I'm so excited today to have Bhaskar here on the call. And Bhaskar, you've been into CPOs and led and grow multiple product organizations, led to multiple success exits, being on product and chief AI officer as well. So we would love to have you sharing with us some of the not obvious truth, but it's so critical to the company to be successful, for the product org to be successful.
Very excited to be here as part of this podcast. So thank you for having me. And yes, I'm very excited to share my journey about how, in particular, AI products in the past 10 years that I've been part of three different startups and also after acquisition, mid-sized enterprise companies. So I'd love to share my thoughts both on the enterprise side, which is where most of my experience has been, but also on the consumer side.
So before we get started, maybe you just start because you kind of brought on a few things, right? You're being the companies of different sizes and different complexity. Maybe share a little bit more of your role. Like when we talk about complexity, when we talk about enterprise, what's in your mind of the factor leading to, for example, complexity or mission critical or some challenges in running companies that you've gone through and are currently at?
I think it does vary from to your point about company size to company size, right? So when you're a startup or a young company, and a startup could mean all the way from you're trying to find product market fit, which is what it was for me in my second startup, or maybe you found the product market fit and you got your early adopters, but you really want to scale it towards an exit, which was my the most recent startup. So the problem varies, and then when either like my days at Oracle or Informatica, when it was a big company, I was part of a product there, or after acquisition part of Cornerstone recently, then it becomes more about a product portfolio problem. Then you have multiple products in your portfolio, you have thousands of customers around the globe, and then where do you put the right bets? So how do you optimize your resources? How do you optimize your energy around that portfolio for success? So it does vary from the company size, the market you're in, as well as the stage of the product and the company that you're in.
Interesting, you mentioned Cornerstone. Cornerstone is a customer of Dragonboat.
I'm aware, yes, yeah.
And we work with them. And in one of the complexity they mentioned is that growth through acquisition, as they have multiple companies coming together. That's the one factors of complexity. So maybe share a little bit more on. You mentioned sort of the acquisition, you mentioned the multiple product. So in your mind, you also mentioned, like, for example, resource allocation. So what are some of the common challenges you see in managing larger complex product and our portfolios?
First of all, I just want to talk about my current role, which I'm the GVP of Product Management and AI for in Skillsoft. We are in the enterprise learning market as well. If I talk about the current challenges I see across, not just the size of the company, but also different domains, is how do you make your product folks ready for AI? Because as you know, we are in the midst of a massive AI revolution, especially unleashed by the generative AI. And then the potential of what AI can do, not only to your product, how do you do AIification, or as I call in my the book that I just launched about infusion of AI into your product. How do you do that, as well as get your team ready, your product team ready for being able to build AI product? So that I think is a very unique challenge as well as an opportunity. And so let me talk about the product part first, and then I'm going to talk about the people first of it. How do you make product management ready? So the way I think about the product part is that, as we know, that all products are getting AI-fied, if that's the word, right? And the way I think about the classification of those AI products is that at the very kind of outer edge, if you think about concentric circle, maybe that one part of the concentric, the outer edge could be what I call AI enhanced. So you could take a product and you do some kind of maybe AI plug into it. Early on, when ChatGPT just came on, so the companies like Expedia had a ChatGPT plugin. So that could be an example of enhanced. So you're quickly going to market leveraging some AI technology. On the other extreme of that is what I call AI core. So what that would mean that the AI itself is a key differentiator for a product. Like talk about Spotify. If I didn't have AI in it, if I didn't have the recommendation engine, then it's just not a streaming service. How do I differentiate? So those are AI core product. And I believe in the vast majority of products that's going to get built over the next, 3 to 5 years is what I call AI infused, which means that you're taking an existing product, your ERP, your CRM, your any other, say HCM product, and then you're picking pieces of the workflow and say, how do I infuse AI into it? And at that point, then you're actually looking at the architecture of the product and you're changing it. And it's not a simple plugin. You're not just saying, oh, I'm going to put a Perplexity like user interface to it and have GPT do the heavy lifting. You need to think to the full end to end. And earlier, before we started our conversation, we talked about things like bias, governance, all those aspects of product coming. So it's a fascinating opportunity, but it's a very different model than your classic deterministic products where a bug is what we all talk about, some logic bug. But here, models are constantly evolving, data is constantly changing. How do you make sure that your product is built in a way it is to the right iteration, the right retraining of your model, it stays the course. So it's a very different mindset we need to have. So that leads me into the segment of how do you make your PMs then ready for it? Can your traditional PM suddenly turn into AI PM? And I believe in my experience, having built AI products with the teams for some time now, that the short answer is no. You cannot take a traditional AI PM and turn him or her into a traditional PM and turn him or her into an AI PM. And then one of the framework I talk about in my book is this notion of theoretical minimum, that an AI PM needs to have the theoretical minimum knowledge of not only your product craft, from strategy all the way to execution, but about what do we know about machine learning? Do we need to know, from supervised learning all the way to if you're using a reinforcement learning, what are the nuances behind it? How do you think about AI product management in more of a framework-driven way? So that theoretical minimum, and then depending on where you're what kind of product you're building. For example, if you're building AI core product, you might need to know a little bit about statistics, linear algebra as well, because you want to have the right conversation with your data scientist. Getting the PM ready I'm seeing that's one of the challenges, because I might have in traditional PMs that I need to retrain, and then it all the way from product portfolio down to execution, all the way to writing stories and doing prototyping with vibe coding products like that.
Wow, there's a lot to unpack. Well, thank you. First of all, I would say, since we just introduced you to the pod today, and your book Infused on the building AI product, it's amazing. So I would love to add it to the notes on where to find the copy. And I think it's a book really helpful for both the beginners and for product leaders to see and look at how bring AI and take advantage of the change today, bring AI to your organization. You touch on two things, and I think each of them are worth deep diving into. So first one, you talk about three types of AI product: AI core, AI infused, and then there's the third one.
Yeah, enhanced.
Enhanced, yes. So the infused is the ones that most teams will be using, especially in the B2B world, right? So it's not just, hey, put a plug in and then being able to access it. So I think you did mention a number of things in terms of how do you take existing product and how do you rethink it, leveraging existing AI technology to make it transform it, right? That not just in transform it into in the architecture or product experience, and also think about how do you build it, how do you iterate on it, and how does a traditional sort of the software or SaaS, how does traditional PDLC now evolve or change and adjust to that? So would love to double click on that. Then we can move on to the people side of things as well. So could you help to share a little bit? You've either in your current or previous role, taking a not very much of an AI native product, right? So, but it's a product, but you want to infuse and adding more capabilities of AI because that makes sense to the customer or use case.
So to answer that question, let me just talk about again, what I think about the core components of a AI product, and that's again something I cover in the book. And in the very simplistic framework I talk about is what I call domain. D stands for data, E in the end. So domain, first of all, is like the domain with a E, like the French word of domain. And so start D as a data, E as explainability in the end, and then you have, O for ops and for model like that. So there are aspects of product that AI product that you need to think about, and each of them are covered in detail in the book. Now, for that product to be built, to your point, it goes to multiple stages of it. The very first one is like you're doing a market sensing to build a product portfolio or a product to even to decide about it. You need to think about market sensing, and that requires a lot of discovery. What type of market? What's my ICP? What's my product differentiation? How I'm going to get to product market fit? And the interesting that that's happening is that with AI now, a lot of that work can be done in conjunction with AI. So, and what a human PM used to do with a lot of research before can be done with good conjunction or partnership with AI models. So the way I'd like us to think about is from discovery all the way to prototyping and beyond, think about in each of these areas what a human does, what can be offloaded to an AI agent, and then how does the human needs to come back again to do further validation? Because as we know, that LLMs hallucinate, and then also there are a lot of data that and the expertise and knowledge that the humans will have, product leaders, their product sense. So putting all of it together in a combination of agentic opportunities that where you find along with your the human knowledge is how I see it. And going back to your point about tooling there, I'm expecting the tools to come up to speed on that as well. So if we have a product portfolio tool which primarily worked in a non-AI world before that, there are data sets that you put in, but there is no, and it's classic analytics on top of it. That's not going to cut in a new world because the PM would be expecting that you're doing AI-powered insights into it and then you're iterating on top of it, right? So I think through the full life cycle and the value chain of the product development, we need to be thinking about that augmentation of what a human does with AI agent.
Right. So you brought up a couple of things. I want to double click on that.
Mhm.
There are, I mean, everywhere you hear that on your LinkedIn feeds and everywhere else is about, having leveraging LLM tools and to do like understanding customer better and then to, prototype fast. But eventually in the end, it will still have to be, okay, we have these feature to customers that drove whatever outcome. So some teams have seen not only you do the front end of the work and you see better features and more features and drive more outcome. Some
Mhm.
teams, they did similar first part of the activities, but didn't seem to have a measurable result in the end. What are some of the differences of you seeing and why some of the team just seems did all the right thing, but didn't quite work?
That's a great question, Becky. And I think, again, before start the call, you and I talked about product management as a discipline. And with full as an ex-engineer and understanding how hard engineering is, I would say that product management is a hard job because of the ambiguity that you have to deal with. Even up to your point, even after doing all the right things, it could still go wrong, and not only because of the competition, outsmarted you in some way, but just that the assumptions, the decisions that you made along the way, from how you identified your market opportunity to product differences, product market fit, things could go wrong. In fact, one thing I mentioned in my book is that even really good companies with like Google has so many products that failed, right? So there is a website someone mentioned called Killed by Google, and it's interesting how many products that Google started. So yes, even after your best efforts, you could go wrong. But what you need to do as a product leader and a product manager is to make sure that to the extent you can, you have a really good plan about removing some of the uncertainties. Be very data driven. Be very identify the right metrics. You touched upon a very good point. Um, we it's not a lot of metrics, but a few key metrics that would drive. In fact, yeah, what I find successful products will have one key North Star business outcome that you can very clearly articulate to your business, and then you would have your standard things like DAU, MAU, and so forth. But there's something that stands for why am I buying this product for either for myself or in the enterprise world for my user base. Um, the complexity that's get added by AI is that those business metrics that's also needs to be thought through from the lens of AI now. So the AI metrics. So if I'm using a classification one, then my precision recall, F1 score, those come into play as well. And then the way I'm thinking about bias detection, fairness indicator, that comes into play. So my short answer, Becky, is that the product leaders need to be very thoughtful about what metrics is relevant for the product portfolio,
Right.
in perfect alignment with the company strategy.
I will ask you a spicy question.
Oh,
Uh, because the some of the variable you mentioned, I think
yeah.
it true, right? So sometimes it's the just the nature of the business, the nature of the beast, right? The product management is hypothesis driven, so that you would inevitably be wrong. That's you cannot influence that. Sometimes it's the customers and market. Sometimes the individual PMs that may not have the skill. Now, the spicy question I have is this: you go from company to company, right? Same
Mhm.
company, same market, same everything, same group of people. When you have someone come in, they made some change, then all of a sudden it seems like a different organization. They have higher successful rate or improve existing product. There must be something beyond the factors that we talk about. I do think there are other factors in terms of how you lead and run product portfolio that would have all the other variables similar, but would have a different outcome. And what do you see that I may go to a company that team is struggle, or maybe you observe externally, then you
Mhm.
say, oh, okay, they're not doing these things right. So if we can change how we operate, then even though the similar environment, we can see a pretty measurable, statistically meaningful change because of the change of any aspect and the multiple aspects of running how we operate.
Um, I don't think it's one of those, and that's why you call it a spicy question. I don't think that's a straight answer, but let me give it a shot. So the way I think about in product management in general, in that dealing with an ambiguity world, ambiguous world, is that there are things within your control. There are things within not your control. There's a good metaphor again is a churn of your customer. We talk about avoidable churn and unavoidable churn. The company got bought by another company, and then the buying company said, "Oh, this is my enterprise standard."
Yeah.
So, right. So your product might get you might get a churn because of so that's your unavoidable churn. So if I bring the same metaphor, the idea is to make sure that the avoidable ones, you have a solid plan in place. So
Right.
that's number one. The second thing is don't get married to beholden to your plan. As new data come in, as new scenarios arises, then you should be you should have the foresight to be flexible about how you refine it. Now that doesn't mean that you're second guessing your decisions all the time, and that's where I think in my view, that great product leaders are that being able to make that decision or being smart about you separating the signal from the noise. That when the new data arrives, is that a signal what makes you refine your model, or is that a noise that you should ignore it? Um, and then I have to say this, I read recently about a major study that was done that um, if you look at success, there is that variable of luck about how you define it. So I'm not going to talk about that because that's again, it's not within your control. Some
Right.
stuff happened outside of your control. But if you set it aside, anything which is within your control, that's how I would approach it. Have a structured way of solving your problem, have a framework of solving it, be open to how you would refine it, separate the signal from the noise. And I think, on top of all of that, strong believer in the team that in the notion that you need to have a strong team. So when you have the right mix of folks with the right team and the team dynamics, then you're able to approach the problems in a very productive way.
Right. So I think one of the, just thinking back, I think you at your role probably for a while now. If you go back in time,
Mhm.
either this role or previous other roles, or even companies you advise, you talk to, that usually when you go in there, you can see, oh, that's a pretty good team, it's a good market. That's why you're there, right? Like it's a good opportunity. And then you also probably see things like, why they do this? It doesn't seem to make sense. What if we do something else? So let me give you an example of what I've seen,
Yeah.
my personal experience. One of the company I went into as a sort of try to help them scale their product engineering organization. When I went in there, I realized, how like good people, smart product, definitely growth potential, but we're not winning against our competitors. Why didn't we winning against our competitors? Because we have, we have this UI struggle and the user experience is not as good. So why don't we face the user experience? Oh, we found out that because we have this backend constraint, therefore make it the front end are scalable. So then
Yeah.
what happened to the backend? Why can't we put some people like you kind of dive into it and you realize that, oh, okay, because this refactor thing has been going on for years. And there was like I keep finding things, and then I realized, oh, okay, the problem is that nobody really know what is scope of work. Nobody like so this dependency is what is not even visible, right? So everyone's trying to solve the visible problem, don't
Yeah.
see the other problem. So if you said the solution was much easier, not that I smart enough to solve the problem. I was able to see that there are root cause after root cause, so like the real root cause. So then we can bring the root cause up front, and then we have a different approach to solve that, so we can unblock things. Because now the goal for that the architecture refactor thing is no longer architecture refactor thing. The goal is how do we unblock the UI iteration. So the goal of the initiative is different, and then we can track different deliverables. And then obviously along with that, we create tools and some of the processes so we can break work down to smaller, and the visibility on that, do better prioritization. In many ways, that's sort of the start of the Dragonboat really, is to say, how do we make it visible so that when we work on certain things, that the purpose of what you work may evolve over time. And as you have a new, like you mentioned, North Star, or like even for initiative, we'll have different goal. All of a sudden, we're gonna work towards this angle as
Yeah.
blocking versus making it scalable and flexible. That's a much bigger goal and take a much more work and different prioritization method. So that's one of the example to say, oh, this is the things, this is like, why don't the people see that? Well, like the reason they don't see is, in my mind, was like different group working different ways. They have their different focus. There's no tooling to provide the visibility for you to see the dependencies and the progress of this. And that by enabling that, plus
Mhm.
other things, that we actually triggered a very outsized impact to unblock the business on something that didn't even seem to be like a kind of business driving initiative.
No, that I mean, what you talked about is absolutely correct. So, I mean, I think that's where, your planning, execution, being done together in a very holistic way using good portfolio tools, execution tools like Jira and other comes into play. To that example, if I, as a product leader, I'm looking at the dials of what I should be looking at in terms of my say-do ratio of my roadmap, as an example, is something you know uh, you know spill over to my next quarter from my current quarter, and what does it do? What's the ripple effect it will have my roadmap? And what can I do by intervening now so that that can be stopped? Um, to your point, starting from OKR all the way down to how my epics and stories get implemented, at any given point of time, if I can tie this all together and see in a very nice dashboard about where I am, tracking the dependencies, that if this part of the product portfolio or this part of the sprint team drops this other one, suddenly this 13 pointer turned out to be a 21 pointer,
Right.
or even God forbid, even 34. Then what does it do to rest of my one? So that having a best practice driven product portfolio to product execution, integration, I think is super important. And then because if you're able to measure, where things go wrong, and where you can anticipate where it could go wrong and then intervene early on, that's how you eliminate some of those, avoidable challenges that I talked about. And these are all, and that's why these tools are very important because, in absence of these tools, we're maintaining a spreadsheet and we know how bad that is.
It's funny, like I always joke with the people to say, hey, look, product is the supposed to be the most innovative, tech forward function in the organization, and the product team making decisions on a pretty analog data versus the real time. And yeah, it's a different story.
Yeah. Well, if I can add one more thing there, Becky, and I think, if I think about opportunity again, right? When you're in a portfolio tool or even in, standard PDLC execution tool, this is where I'm excited about the possibility of AI again, right? So as I'm building the portfolio product that ties into my execution. So as a platform, even your platform, you have data from many different types of products, many different industries. And to the extent that, and that's what we do, we are a SaaS platform ourselves. And what our customers look for is what insights am I gleaning out of that? That will be relevant for my customer to say, I can reduce my cycle time by doing this, right? So take the same example in a product portfolio. If the product is using AI machine learning to understand those and then saying, hey, based on uh, how your past sprints have been working, and then the type of problem you're trying to solve, you're trying to solve, these are potential challenges. Then what I, as a product leader, can do is that I can leverage the tool and use that as my guide as to things where I need to put my focus on to again eliminate those avoidable challenges that I can. So I think
Yeah.
that's where a big opportunity for AI comes in.
Yeah, it's a quite so you mentioned two things I think are we see that all the time from our customer too. One is the ripple effect, right?
Mhm.
Because in the product portfolio, everything's connected. So something taking longer, that means something else or many things could be impacted. Understanding that is definitely important. And
Yeah,
even just from an ROI or other go-to-market perspective, when something takes longer, the things that original you make a decision to go with it probably may not be a valid decision anymore. So yeah, that having that visibility is definitely something very important. We hear that all the time.
yeah,
Now we did talk about sort of making your current product, not your like a lot of the company's product, not quite AI infused yet. So
Mhm.
as you go through the journey to turn your existing product, let's say go through your architecture or customer experience and all this thought process, and then you need to change it right to a AI infused, then you will have a different planning cycle, different not just release the product will be done with it, right? So many iterations on, obviously the product always have iteration on an experience than others, but in an AI product, it may need more,
Yeah,
right? Just some more variables. So what are some of the challenges you see there to go from a SaaS or tip like a traditional software to AI
yeah.
used? What are the operational challenge especially in the context of how do you plan, how do you operate, how do you and bring the product market and improve and iterate on that?
Great question. So, one of the things I talk about again in the book is that I believe that there'll be two kind of, and I'm a little bit of a theoretical or like a physics buff. So, even a theoretical minimum I borrowed from a physics book. But the way I see is what I call a centripetal and a centrifugal force. So, AI enhanced, which is on the outer edge, which is where you're doing the plugin over time, you need to think about that moving into AI infused, and I believe that's the centripetal force.
Yeah,
And then the other one is that you have AI core product, which also needs to move into AI infused state.
right.
Um, in either of the scenarios where you're starting with something basic, putting in the plugin, then moving into more, the full workflow, or the other way around from core into infused, what the first thing you need to do is study the workflow really well, right? And then, because what parts of the workflow can I start infusing AI into it? And just like anything, there also you need to start in an iterative fashion. Pick your low-hanging fruits. Pick areas where you're able to infuse. Like one low-hanging fruit that I've experienced in my journey is that analytics. There are, if you think about most of the enterprise products will have some level of analytics offering with it. And then we do a lot of forecasting in that, and most of the analytics or forecasting prior to AI infusion is more done through deterministic way, standard statistical algorithms in a deterministic. So there's an opportunity, there's a window for you to turn into more machine learning where it's, learning from the data and it's more iterative fashion. So that could be one example. Your second one could be pick your interface. There might be an opportunity for a coach right there that as you're doing something, in our case, we are doing a career journey. I want to product manager, but I want to move into sales. And then what skill gaps do I have and how do I address it? There could be your generative AI based coach right there who tells you, helps you along the way. So that's again a low-hanging fruit. With the right kind of APIs into an LLM, you can start tying things together. So having that sort of crawl, walk, run, the classic paradigm,
Yeah.
and then having a full knowledge of or analysis of your workflow is how you would do it. The other thing I always advise folks is that think about build versus buy in that scenario. And in our space recently, there was a big acquisition of a European company. I'm not going to tell you the name, but and then it's because I believe that again the infusion of that. Am I going to infuse it myself, or am I going to buy something and integrate it infuse? So we're going to see quite a few of these as well, that the like bigger enterprise players might sometime, buy a startup who's been doing it as an AI core, but to the bigger company, it's infusion because
Right.
you're replacing a part of the portfolio. I mean, part of the portfolio and the workflow.
Yeah, I think that's actually happening a lot, right? We see a
Yeah.
lot, like a traditional company buying AI, sort of a native, a smaller startup, bring in, infuse that technology and also the thought process and practice into it, because there is a different mindset into that era.
Yeah.
One, so it's related to what you described is that when that happens, so like the interesting observation you said that AI core would have been AI infused is true. Spotify is AI core, but you still have to have a user experience. You have all the integrations, all of the stuff. Otherwise, just a recommendation engine, it's not gonna be a product, right?
Yeah.
So still, this other things need to be there. So the other way around is also true. More and more products today. They have built understand customers business, like in your business and learning, right? In your business, when it comes to learning, you have to understand the customer. There's a lot of things understanding. You have to have a content so that you infuse AI into that definitely will be sort of the other way around. Now,
Yeah.
when you see company going through this two paths, right? You also gone through M&As, and so what are some of the avoidable challenges, like challenges they had, and
Yeah.
you'd be like, oh, because next time I don't want to make that same challenge anymore organizationally. What are some of the things you've seen that were, um, you know, challenges that you're running to, and so hopefully we don't have others to run it again by learning from previous other people's learning.
I mean, it's true for bigger enterprise companies as well. But I think it's more acute when you're a startup or a young company, which is about, your resources are limited. It's a portfolio problem, and then, I always talk about you want to think about your portfolio product because you don't want to be a one-hit wonder, right? You
Right.
just want to be just one product company. At the same time, you have to start somewhere, which is your wedge, if you will. You start with one wedge product, which is where you penetrate the market. But you got to have your eye and vision on what the spectrum of products that you could potentially be playing in. And then beyond that, what are the adjacencies? I think that being in a very thoughtful way is very important because you know, with engineering, smart engineers, you can build anything pretty much. And today is even more easier with vibe coding and so forth. But the question is, what should we be building, and what adjacencies that we should be in? I think that having that smartness about your core product, then what makes it a portfolio, and then what are adjacencies is very important. The other very important thing is, especially in a young or startup company, what should I build now versus what should I partner versus buy, right? Even as a young company, you have some buying opportunity. Those decisions, I believe, is what makes a successful startup or young company. And that's true for even bigger companies because the pot is bigger, right? Market opportunities are bigger, but you're
Right.
still constrained by how fast can you build something and get it to the market. And I think that's why portfolio planning, having and with the right tools at your disposal is so critical.
It's funny you mentioned that. Well, thank you. Good insight. I think it's for I think some companies the one all the way go to public and has only one product. That's not very, it's definitely peculiar in today's world, right? So
Yeah.
at certain size, you really should have multiple products and then think about where you either build by partner. That's a really good call out. It was great conversation. I actually have multiple questions I want to ask you around the peoples and others, but given the time constraint,
Yeah.
maybe I will just go back to like a two sort of I don't want to say a rapid fire question, but the question I
Mhm.
have here is it's aspirational, but it's practical. Meaning, still going back to saying that, hey, you go to a company, you have great opportunity in the market, pretty good team. Obviously, things can always improve, but just something, how they work, how they in all aspects related to product, right? So from the very beginning to all the way to driving P&L, right? So any part of that.
Yeah.
There's always some low-hanging fruit challenges. So what are the things you see there? And if you have a magic wand, say, hey, tomorrow I have this is gonna be solved. What would be low-hanging fruit, number one, and the magic wand that's solving tough problems.
I think the one I consistently see is having um, good process. And what I mean by that is um, not process where it's tying it down, but having by process I mean even as a startup, as I said, having that notion of how I'm going to size the market, how I'm going to think about my product portfolio and what product would I have, and then how I'm going to build on top of it. I think that insight in a very thoughtful way, doing that. If I had a magic wand, and if first day I walk in as a product leader to a new company, and then boom, I know that right away. That'll be fantastic. I think it's wishful thinking, but then again, in my experience, that's where a good product leader does that through experience and then working with a team. They are able to quickly get to that point, because the last thing you want is, you made a lot of wrong turns and moves, and 6 months later you're revisiting that. So that early thinking about, you know, some of your product, your competitive landscape, your differentiation, and then how I'm going to build a roadmap. I mean, they sound very easy, but in practice, very hard to do, right? And that's what differentiates the actual winners versus losers, in my view.
You have something very interesting because sometimes the people put a process as a bad word, but
Yeah,
then on the other hand, if it's a thought process of think about your product and the business and the people and the customer, right? So you're saying is to say, you know, how do we think about the market? How do we think about competition? How do we think about the product and the value customer? That the how do we of
yeah,
running product in general, right? So then you can say, oh, okay, these are the things that we can tweak. These are the things that we can improve, even with the same people. So the magic one is knowing your process and then getting
yeah,
people to do it just a little better. Each one of that does make a difference. I totally agree. Wow,
yeah.
we're running out of time. I wish I had another hour, but this is amazing. So, well, thank you so much, Bhaskar. I think, your experience in so many companies that, regardless it's a startup, it's an acquisition, scale, transform, AI, or traditional are so relevant to us. So, great conversation. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Becky. Thank you for having me. And I do have to do this final thing about the
Your
book
book.
right here. I know that it's not available for order yet because I want folks to have the holiday time with family, but it'll be available in mid-January. And then happy to share the link, Becky. But Really appreciate you having me. Very thoughtful, thought-provoking questions. I'm sure I'll be thinking about those questions later on as well. But thank you for having me, Becky.